Hi, my name is Dean Smith, and in this podcast, I want to discuss the reaction that took place when popular Christian minister Jeremiah Johnson went public that his prophecy that Donald Trump would win the November 2020 election was false.
Welcome to a podcast by opentheword.org, where we discuss a bit of Bible, a bit of life, and a bit of politics.
On January 20, 2021, Joe Biden was inaugurated as the 46th President of the United States. This was in complete contradiction to dozens of prophecies given in 2020 and earlier that Donald Trump would win a second term as U.S. President. And I have to confess that I was sucked into this prophecy vortex. For the record, I believe in prophecy, and I have received some very specific prophecies that came to pass. However, when their prophecies about Donald Trump winning the November 3rd election failed, citing election fraud, several doubled down and began to stretch out their prophecies, stating that it would all turn around by the end of November. When that didn't happen, they prophesied it would be straightened up in December. And when that didn't happen, they pointed to the Electoral College vote on January 6, 2021 and said Trump's victory would be sorted by then. Other than a riot on Capitol Hill, it didn't come to pass. But then they pressed ahead, stating that God would pull out a miracle in the days leading up to the inauguration on January 20th, and with Joe Biden now President of the United States, several are still prophesying God would put Trump back in the presidential office in February, with others stating we will know in March or April. I have even heard one man who prophesied Trump would win now stating that Trump did win, but it was stolen because of fraud. Others are now suggesting that Trump is the spiritual president of the United States and Biden the physical. But even if these allegations of fraud are true, they are completely irrelevant because these prophecies stated categorically Trump was going to win, fraud or no fraud. The fact remains, Trump lost, and these prophecies were wrong. While these individuals are doubling down, others who prophesied Trump's victory are now apologizing and admitting they made a mistake. Now, I'm not going to get into why they are wrong, only to suggest that sometimes we fall into the trap of calling wishful thinking a prophecy. But there's one thing that very much concerns me, and that relates to what happened to popular minister Jeremiah Johnson after he publicly admitted that his prophecy about Trump's victory was wrong, apologized, and retracted it. Now, that must have been an incredibly difficult thing for him to do, and I applaud him for it. But according to a statement on his Facebook page, Johnson stated that he received death threats after he issued his retraction. Here are a few things Jeremiah Johnson reported. Quote, "Over the last 72 hours, I have received multiple death threats and thousands upon thousands of emails from Christians saying the nastiest and most vulgar things I have ever heard towards my family and ministry. I have been labeled a coward, sellout, a traitor to the Holy Spirit, and cussed out at least 500 times. We have lost ministry partners every hour and counting. After publicly repenting on January 7th, I fully expected to be called a false prophet, etc. in some circles, but I could have never dreamed in my wildest imagination that so much satanic attack and witchcraft would come from charismatic prophetic people. I have been flabbergasted at the barrage of continued conspiracy theories being sent every minute our way and the pure hatred being unleashed." Unquote. Did you hear that? Even believers were sending death threats. It's incredible to think this is happening, but it points to a potentially more serious problem. A couple of weeks back, I listened to a statement that Chuck Pierce, who many believe is a true prophet, made regarding the Trump prophecies. First, Pierce prophesied before the 2016 U.S. federal election that Donald Trump would win the U.S. presidency, which against all odds he did. But in the midst of the dozens of prophecies predicting Trump's reelection in 2020, Chuck was oddly silent. He never gave a prophetic word about who would win the 2020 federal election. This, of course, caught people's attention, and when asked why he hadn't given a prophetic word, Pierce simply stated that God had not given him a word on who was going to win, so he said nothing. But then Chuck Pierce mentioned an odd thing. He said prior to the 2008 election that he was widely criticized when he prophesied that Democrat presidential nominee Barack Obama would beat the Republican John McCain in the race for the U.S. presidency, which Obama did. And this has an odd connection to what I see happening with Jeremiah Johnson, who now believes his Trump prophecy was wrong. And let me explain this connection with this story. I love football, and several years back I was on my team's fan forum, and there was a poster who was regularly attending the team's training camp and reporting on how the new and veteran players were doing. On the day in question, he had noticed one outstanding rookie wide receiver who was clearly a threat to knock off one of the team's veteran players. He wasn't alone in that opinion, as others had noticed his outstanding play as well. But I was shocked by the outrage over his report. Person after person criticized this post, but it didn't stop there, as many began to personally attack the person giving the report, stating that he was stupid and knew nothing about football. Finally, I couldn't take it any longer and asked one of the more vile commenters what the problem was. Since all this camp reporter was doing was telling people what he saw, I asked the person if he preferred that this training camp reporter lie and state that this rookie was horrible and dropped every pass. It was a simple question. Did he want to hear the truth, even if he didn't like it, or did he prefer a lie? When people got angry that Pierce prophesied that Obama would beat McCain, were they preferring a lie over the truth? When people threatened Jeremiah Johnson after he retracted his inaccurate prophecy, were they preferring a lie over the truth? Here is my bigger concern. When people prefer lies over the truth, they immediately open themselves to believing other lies. We make ourselves vulnerable to delusion as satanic deception. In the end times, Paul wrote that God was going to send a spirit of delusion upon this world. We read, quote, "For this reason, God will send upon them a deluding influence so that they will believe what is false, in order that they all may be judged who did not believe the truth, but took pleasure in wickedness." 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 11 to 13, unquote. My concern is, if we prefer lies over the truth, then believers will be equally vulnerable to this deluding spirit and other forms of deception as well. Twice in his warnings about the end times in Matthew chapter 24, Jesus warned about being deceived. It starts with, first, not making ourselves vulnerable to deception by wanting the truth, whether we like it or not.
Thanks again for joining us on our podcast. Please check out our website at opentheword.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to receive notifications of future broadcasts. As well, please take a moment to provide a rating and even a review. Thanks again for listening.